So in terms of that, it's just on a case-by-case situation. So what we've learned, of course, throughout the journey is that each country is specific to what they do. And even whether you think it's only just maybe like between West Africa and Eastern Africa, but even like within even the same region, you'll have different countries that have their different contexts because of their different levels of development. So which will impact the mentalities of the people, how you approach them, and even the infrastructure that is existing within the country. So for example, I can take the example of Kenya as a market, which is very different because you have, people are more digitally savvy. You have products like M-Pesa that have been here for around 10 years, which makes it that people are a lot more digital, so it's a lot more easy to access, even especially when in terms of like maybe doing mobile money transfers, paying them with airtime. And when you compare that to a country, maybe like say like Somalia, way more underdeveloped, being able to send money to people is quite different, even the way you approach them, because they're not necessarily used to doing surveys or even being approached for research. So there's, a very different way of how you approach them. And this is within all the 54 countries. So the way you go about it is you go into the country, you learn how they do it. You have to be very flexible and modulable. And then in that sense, that's how you are able to extract the most insights. When it comes to the brands that are not used to the African context, there's a couple of misconceptions. Well, one, for example, around language. People assume that that there's not necessarily a lot of literate people, which is not true, but they also don't understand certain things. Like for example, in West Africa, where a lot of the local languages are spoken, they're not necessarily written. So for example, doing a survey where you write it in Yoruba or in Wolof will not necessarily help because people won't be able to read it. The only way you can do it is by speaking to them in its local languages. For example, where most people will either speak French or English, and that is something that you can have a written form and people can fill in the surveys. I think the other one that they also don't take into account is that every country is different. So they usually want to have a specific framework that's going to be, working for everything, like a one-stop shop solution, which in reality, that's not how I do it. You really have to, take it on a market per market basis and then try to see how you can have like a global approach to it, but still while having, I think, the more specific methodologies for each market.